We're back with another tutorial, and this time I want to talk to you about transition. And I don't mean the easy overlays like film burns and ink splats. I mean the fundamentals that you can use in any project regardless of style, all with the help of today's video sponsor, Artlist. Every good transition in animation is predicated on two things: pace and rhythm. What is pace and rhythm? Pace is speed of movement. It can be slow, it can be fast, it can be anything in between, where rhythm is the regularity of said movement. A good place to analyze how pace and rhythm go together is in drumming. You can have the slow, consistent banging of the bass drum, where you at the same time can have a fast section of the snare drum. It doesn't matter whether it's a match cut, a hard cut, or any other types of transitions we see in movies and animations. Let's take this piece as an example. Looks cool, and it's very clean, but we can all agree that it feels pretty flat, right? Why? Because it lacks rhythm and pace. Now let's take a look at the same animation, but just spiced up with a little bit of pace and rhythm. All of a sudden, it feels a lot more dynamic and interesting. Pace and rhythm in Large is instinctual. That also means that although you can learn to work with it, the only way to really get better at it is to practice it. Now, come a little closer. It all starts with learning the fundamentals of animation, the basics of movement. We need to learn to work with anticipation, easing, and velocity. You can learn a lot more about that in this article, which I've also linked down below. You can also start paying more attention to reality. Notice how things move in real life. The more your animations are grounded in reality, the better they'll feel. Before I show you some transitions that are ridiculously easy that you can use in your animations and in your projects, I want to talk about something else that's now also super easy, thanks to this video sponsor, Artlist. Removing silences from your videos, automatic zooms, color grading, adding music, sound effects, generating voiceovers, and much more. All thanks to Artlist's new feature, Tools, which makes your video editing workflow as easy as can be. Once you've installed Tools, you can open any Premiere project and that's it. You can get started. It basically gives you access to the entire Artlist library within Premiere, so you never have to leave. I think we all know how much of a hassle it is to not only find a song, but having to download them, drag them into your timeline, and only then finding out if that song actually works for your project. With Artlist Tools, that's a thing of the past. You can simply sync the extension to your timeline so that you can listen to the song at the same time as your project. So that just means that you can check if the song fits before ever downloading it, and even at that point, you simply drag it from Artlist Tools into your timeline, and that's it. You no longer have to find it, download it, drag it in, and keep all your files organized. So not only does it save you time, but it also saves you valuable storage on your computer. Same thing goes for sound effects and voiceovers. You can do all that without ever leaving Premiere Pro, so you can just test out as many sound effects as you want before committing to one. Obviously, you're going to need an Artlist subscription to get access to Artlist Tools. Luckily for you, you can use my link in the description, which will give you 2 months for free when you sign up for the annual subscription. So make sure to get started now, easier and more efficiently than before. And again, thank you to Artlist for sponsoring this video. With that being said, let's get back to some transitions. The first type of transition I want to talk to you about is the hard cut. Now, this is a transition that I think is extremely overlooked, especially in animation. I think we have a tendency to think that we need something crazy, fancy, and flashy when most of the time a hard cut will do. Now, with that being said, I do think that there are some scenarios that make a hard cut feel a lot more sexy. One of my favorites being using contrast, going from light to dark, the other way around, or even using something like color theory to go between contrasting colors. A tiny detail like that can really spice up a hard cut, but in general, don't be afraid to just use the hard cut when working with transitions. Next up is the movement transition. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's simply using movement to drive momentum and attention. This one is a classic in most mediums, but especially in 2D animation, which is why it's super important to learn the fundamentals of it so that you can use it with expertise. And trust me, you will use this one a lot. I've been holding out long enough for you guys. The transition that I want to talk about today is the match cut transition because it is so versatile. I have a few different examples here in After Effects that we are going to be taking a look at to see how you can utilize it in your motion design projects. I want to make sure that I emphasize that this is how you can use it. These techniques you can use pretty much for anything. It doesn't have to be like this first one where it's articles. It can be legitimately whatever. First up, 1920 by 1080 composition for all 3 of these, just to keep it super simple at 24 frames per second. Of course, you can get the project files on patreon.com/Mapal if you're interested in that. And yeah, let's just hop into animating. So first one here is going to be a nice little match cut. So I have these articles, and these are all PDF files, so that means they're super high res. But to get that quality, I need to enable continuously rasterize, which just lets me zoom in a lot more with keeping that quality compared to with it off. So we want to definitely have this on. And now all of these articles should have a very specific word, which is judge. Now I'm gonna take this, maybe scale this down a little bit. It is just a little bit blurry, so I'm gonna scale this down just a little bit. I'm gonna open my grid by hitting Option and apostrophe, and I'm just gonna place judge, it can be whichever one, in the middle. So I'm just gonna place that one right there. And then I'm gonna hide this, and I'm gonna scale this one up as well, scale it up a good bit. And again, we need to find where it says judge, and we have one right here. So I'm just gonna enable that again. And this one we might wanna scale down a little bit just because the word is so big. So if we flick between them, it's not gonna work as good with the text differences being so big. So I'm just gonna scale this down a little bit more until it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye. Maybe something like that. And the good thing is we can always check like this just to make sure that it does look kind of okay. And last but not least, this third article, scale it up. And let's see if we can find where it says judge right there, and then scale this up as well. So now we have boom and boom. So 3 judges, super nice. I wanna start with this one. So I'm just gonna drag that to the bottom and then this. And then all we wanna do is really just move it over a little bit. So I'm gonna move that over and move that over. And just like that, we have a nice little match cut. Now, this works really well if you have a lot of different assets, and it's probably the simplest one you can do, and you'll probably use this a lot in your effects. Now, there's one thing you can do if you want to spice it up a little bit more. Like earlier, I was talking about a hard cut using contrast. So let's say you have one article here, and then you can go in, invert that, and that would be then a black article, but that's just to spice it up a little bit. And it works as well if you just add a solid, let's say a black, and then right here, we'll just trim that up, and let's just change the color to white. Cutting with contrast just helps so much. So we have black and white. Let's just add some text. Please subscribe. And let's just scale this text down a little bit and cut that up right there, and then split. And then we're just gonna change this to a black. Now, let's see what that looks like. So we have boom, boom, and it's just so clean, but it works so well because you're using that contrast to play, I wouldn't say a trick on the brain, but it does just kind of play a little bit. It tickles the fancy a little bit in the brain. But yeah, please do subscribe. I would appreciate that. Next up, we have the movement match cut type thing. The first one I want to be doing is a position. And in this instance, it does help a little bit if your pictures are kind of similar, just so you get a little bit of that match cut, but it's honestly not necessary. So I have 2 pictures here, and I'm just gonna scale this down. I mean, you can scale it, it doesn't really matter, honestly. You can keep them whatever scale. Scale it up fully, and then let's just move this first picture down to right about here. And then the second picture, let's put it right here. So these are definitely 2 different images, same subject, but definitely different images. It's gonna be this simple, are you ready? So I'm just gonna go forward to any point where I want the transition to occur. I'm gonna hit P to open up the position. I'm gonna keyframe the position. Now for the first image, and this doesn't really matter, you just wanna make sure they are the opposite. You wanna move the keyframe out a little bit. So let's just say, I'm just gonna move that 12 frames. And then this image, I'm just gonna move over to one side. And then I'm gonna take this other image and move it over to the other side. Easing is super important when it comes to this specific cut, because otherwise it's just gonna look a little bit funky. But essentially what you wanna do is, if you are a member of the Patreon, you can go in and download this, which is Sexy Speed, so you can add that. Or you just wanna go in and make sure the easing looks pretty nice. And then in most cases, in where you're switching between the scenes in the middle of the movement, you wanna make sure that you cut where the most movement is happening. So let's say right about here would be a pretty good spot to cut it. So it'll cut over from boom to that. So, and here we are solely relying on the movement of the cut to carry over the animation. And this is what I was talking about earlier with using momentum to drive the attention, which is one of the most powerful tools that you need to utilize in animations. This is how you can dictate where someone looks, is with the motion. So super simple. There's nothing really fancy going on, except for we do have a little bit of a cut here, and that's all. We just have some movement that makes it so we kind of match the pace and the movement of the 2 images to cut between them. Next up, we have a movement match cut again, but this time using scale. Again, super easy. I have 2 different images. One is a very large image of Earth, and then one is further away. Now, I'm just gonna take this and scale this down a good bit more here, and then I'm just gonna place it kind of where in the center here, and then I'm gonna hide that, and I'm gonna place this roughly in the center as well. And now we could just do a hard cut as well. That would, and legitimately that would work in this instance because we have close and then kind of zoom in. But to give it a little bit more spice, what we can do is play with the scale. Now we can do this the same way that we did before by animating the scale individually, but one way I like to do this is actually using a null. So you can use Void or you can use a regular null, it doesn't matter. Void is a free plugin. But what I'm gonna do here is I wanna make sure that my zoom is in the middle of the composition. So I'm just gonna click while having my layer selected. I'm gonna shift click the void, which is just gonna create a null in the middle of the composition, just like a regular null would, but just a little bit faster than right clicking, blah, 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 whatever. Anyways, we're gonna go here, we're gonna hit S to bring up the scale, and then we're gonna keyframe that, and then we're gonna go forward a little bit, and maybe increase this maybe 110, 120. You kind of want to play around with the value a little bit. And again, we are going to use the sexy speed, and it is so sexy because it is so versatile. And then we just, again, want to place the cut right in the middle where the motion happens. So if I open up, you see, this is where the cut happens. If I open up the graph, we pretty much have that right in the middle. And we can always go in and fine tune this. You just want it to be roughly in the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect, but let's play this back and then see, boom, flawless. Now you can go in, you can play with this, change the scale to make sure that we actually, you know, accommodate the increase in scale, but a very, very super simple little, you know what I'm saying, just a little ta-da, boom. And you can spice this up even more, like in the Johnny Harris tutorial where we talk about movement, but also using blurs to kind of cut between them, which can work super nice if you just want to blend it a little bit more. Now, last but not least, we have rotation. And again, the principle is pretty much the same. I did this poster recently where I used this technique and I thought it looked super sick. So I figured I'd throw it in here as well because it is a nice little, I guess a nice little transition if you are working with something that is circular. Most of the time that works the best, although you don't really need that to be the case. But we have this image here, and then let's show up the next. And I'm just gonna hit T to bring up the opacity and scale this down a little bit. So I can either pick if I want to play with the, or if I want to have it at the size of the cubes or the size of the coffee. Now I'm just gonna have it at the size of the coffee because I feel like that is the center focal point. And then I'm gonna increase the opacity again, and then I'm gonna do the same thing for our last little bit here, whatever this thing is. Scale that roughly to be, boom, make sure that is centered up right there, hit T and cut that open. Again, we can just move these out a little bit so that we just have a little bit of movement here, boom, boom. And already it kind of works because it's all centered, but what we are gonna do, same thing as we did just a second ago, we're gonna select all of these, I'm gonna hit shift and then I'm gonna create a void to make sure it's right in the center. And this is super important that your object is in the center. So like if you had a wheel, you wouldn't want it to wobble wonky. If I were to drag this down here and then rotate, you see how it's not aligned in the middle. So it's actually super important that these are perfectly aligned in the middle for this to work as well as you want it to. But from there, it's all about taking the rotation, keyframe the rotation, again, move forward a little bit. And I mean, you don't have to go a full circle around. You can just do something like 45 degrees. The good thing about a circle is it's perfectly round, I guess. So you can just do a little bit, boom. And you can always counter that by taking the layer before it and just do a -45 so that it actually finishes in the position that you want it to, which is, you know, just always a good thing. And then we can just go forward again, and then let's put it to 90, so another 45 degrees. And then I'm just gonna take this and do a -90, because that'll be going a full 90 degrees from where it started. And let's just take them and add some sexy speed. And then we can just cut these right as they transition. So maybe move this over just a little bit here and cut that. So we get a nice little cut on the movement. And the same thing here, just wanna make sure we are cutting right in the middle of the movement to get the best effect that we can. And just like that, we have a nice little transition there. Again, we're just using the movement to cut between the three, and it feels nice because, well, it's you cut into the movement, you have something that feels familiar in each frame. This works for scenes, it works for text, it works for individual elements. We have a tendency to overdo transitions. They don't always have to be something crazy. Just a quick little tip, in this example, you can also just use the invert effect. So if you add invert to an adjustment layer, and this I like doing just a little zip zip. So maybe 2 frames, go a frame over, and then just give it 1 frame. So it's kind of like a quick little stutter, and that just looks super clean. And you can cut anything in here. Like it doesn't even have to be the same color. It's just the fact that it kind of flicks a little bit. super, super nice to transition with. But with that being said, that is pretty much it for this video. I hope you learned something new about transitions, because they are a big part of what we do as a, in general, like professional thing. Like we have to transition between a lot of things, so it's nice knowing them. With that being said, I just want to say thank you to Artlist for sponsoring this video. Shout out my Patreon if you are a member, or if you're not, you can just become one and you can get access to project files and stuff like that. And with that being said, I just want to say thank you, and I'll see you again very soon. Peace out.